Welcome to the Boldest You podcast. I'm your host, Carrie, and I'm thrilled to bring you real conversations with bold women and men. In this podcast, we dive deep into their stories, exploring what drives their courage, shapes their vision, and fuels their desire to leave a lasting impact. These are honest, vulnerable, and inspiring moments that celebrate what it means to be bold. Let's discover their legacies together. I'd like to introduce you to our bold woman of the hour, Kelsey Buell. Kelsey is an authentic and enthusiastic team builder. She is also an accomplished violinist and singer, having performed in front of audiences as large as 15,000. She has given hundreds of presentations on goal setting, preventing burnout, stress management, and leadership skills. As a former corporate recruiter, she conducted over 2,000 candidate interviews. And through her experience, she uncovered the fact that many people are disengaged in their jobs. This led her to a strong passion for training and development. She sees the value in investing in yourself and your team. Kelsey's goal is to help you discover ways to flourish in all areas of your life, both personally and professionally. She founded You Flourish Company as a way to invest deeply in those throughout her community of Fargo and beyond. She specializes in helping working moms find ways to balance their personal and professional lives through speaking, group coaching, and courses. Welcome to the podcast, Kelsey. Let's get into it. Hi, Kelsey. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad to have you.
Hi, Carrie. Thank you so much for having me. This is fun.
Yes, it is. All right. Well, we're going to jump right in. So can you share a time when you've had to be bold?
This is such a great question, and I knew you were going to ask it coming in, and so I've really been thinking about this. For me personally, I really look back to the time when I was a recruiter. So freshly out of college, I joined an organization by the name of Northwestern Mutual. Some of you maybe have heard of it before. And during that season of my life, I had big goals and big aspirations, and I was calling everybody under the sun. And so it was really fun because I had the opportunity to recruit people for a career path. And during that time, I remember having just this excitement and enthusiasm and not being afraid to pick up the phone and call anybody. And so when I think about when I've been super bold, I think about those moments, especially when I was a recruiter, where I was not afraid to talk to anyone about this career opportunity. And I feel like that also set me up for success in terms of being able to be bold in other life situations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that opportunity that you were working at brought us together. I know that was the start of
Yeah,
our friendship, which
I know.
crazy to think about that was like 10 years at this point. I don't even know. It was a long
Yeah,
time ago.
I
Um,
know. I tried to recruit you.
yes, we quickly figured out financial accounting type realm not for me,
Mhm.
but hey, it
Yep,
brought us a friendship, so I'll take what we can get from it. And I agree.
absolutely.
I think a lot of people think picking up the phone is intimidating, is scary, and sometimes it's a bold thing to do. Um, so and even thinking about that role as a recruiter, let's start there and talk about your experience. So do you think you know do you think being bold in that setting came naturally to you? Was it something that you had to work at over time, or yeah, what drew you into that recruiting space too? I know that's where you really started your career.
Yeah.
So I'm curious.
I've always been in a sales oriented career, and I think, yes, it did come naturally. And it also came naturally because I had no fear in that
Mm,
moment. And I think when I look back through my life, there have been moments where I go through these seasons of having no fear and things are going well. And that was definitely that season for me. I think as time goes on, what often happens is we start with uninformed optimism and we're excited and no fear, and then as time goes on, sometimes our belief or our grit starts to wear off. Or I even recall all of a sudden feeling a greater sense of rejection the more no's I would get. And even
mm,
though as I was in that role, I wasn't necessarily getting more no's than I had gotten a year before. It was just the compiled no's over time, and that compiled feeling of rejection actually led me to being less bold and starting to maybe decrease in my ability to reach out and do my job, which was really unfortunate.
Yeah, I like that term, uninformed optimism. I've never heard of it put that way, but I think it applies to a lot of situations, especially a new job when you're just excited. We all feel that way when you get into a role and maybe there's some nerves mixed in there, but you're just excited about what's to come. And then I agree, year after year when you become more experienced, you know what to expect, so you're able to prepare yourself. You can start to put that pressure on yourself of, well, I have to do better than I did last year and I have to do this even if last year was a success. We then put that pressure on, it has to continue to get bigger and better, and that allows us to set ourselves up for failure in the sense of maybe isn't an actual failure, but it might feel like one because we just haven't met the expectations that we set for ourselves year to year. um, and so, yeah, as you know, when we were meeting, I know you shortly transitioned out of recruiting after, and into the nonprofit world. So, what drove that choice to really flip your career on what you were doing, and pursue something entirely different?
I think it was more of a feeling I was looking for at that moment in time. I think I had spent so much time in this feeling of hustle culture. And I think we all go through these seasons where we're like, I want to see the direct impact right in front of my face so that I know I'm making a difference. And so I transitioned from this very black and white cookie cutter role at Northwestern Mutual where I knew exactly what I needed to do and how I was going to do it to this very gray nonprofit area where I truly had the opportunity to be very creative and also bold in very new ways. And so,
Mm,
like we already touched on, that uninformed optimism started all over again once I entered my time in the nonprofit world. I was at TNT Kids Fitness. And so, again, started with this uninformed optimism. And I think I learned throughout that journey that, again, every time we start something new, we have to prepare ourselves for that bell curve because you
mm,
go from uninformed optimism to informed pessimism, which, if you allow the informed pessimism to get the best of you, it's easy after 90 days, if things aren't going well, to think this job isn't for me. I should probably just quit. And so I've found that in life, like almost every new opportunity I join, even if it's a board or a committee or just any sort of new experience, I actually anticipate the bell curve so that once I'm in the bottom of that and I'm to that point of a little bit more, okay, like I get what I signed up for. This is maybe going to be harder than I thought, or maybe this is going to be easier than I thought. I can at least kind of mentally prepare of how to push through because,
mm.
again, it's a lot easier once things settle in to kind of say let's quit, and I don't have the
Yeah.
desire to be as bold as I once was. So at TNT, that was just such a fun opportunity though for me to be more creative and use a different part of my brain.
Yeah. I like, similarly to the uninformed optimism, that informed pessimism. And I think what was coming to my mind as you were saying that was this, when we get into that bottom of that bell curve and are in that phase, the detachment that we oftentimes want. And I know I've been in that, like when it's a stressful season of life, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm in that informed pessimism state. I just go like, oh, it'd be so much easier just to detach and isolate and back away from this and just say like, I don't care. Or, even though that's probably not realistic, I probably
Mhm.
care way more than I need
Mhm.
to. And that's why I'm feeling so stuck in that place. So when you've been in those stages, and I love that you think about that going into something now, you prepare yourself. What are the ways that you get yourself beyond that, that you get back to that place of feeling inspired and creative and, not feeling so stuck or pessimistic?
Well, it's funny because I would say that when we get to that point in a job, that's when we're the least likely to be bold.
Mm,
And the only way that I've generally found myself out of that is contradictory, but it is to be bold. And
sure.
so it's like you get into this rut where you don't have the energy, the desire, the excitement or enthusiasm to like keep going or to try something new. And that's actually the best time to try to
Mm,
find a way to rip off the band-aid and still get out of your comfort zone because what I often find is and this is a bio girl saying, but action conquers fear.
yes.
In those moments, it's the reason why I'm maybe pessimistic is because there is some sort of fear that's developed in me, a fear, usually a fear of rejection. And so at that moment, that's when it becomes almost like a game that I play with myself of like, I'm feeling defeated. Things aren't going as well today. I have no desire to be bold because I'm in this, we'll just call it a rut. And so at those moments, I challenge myself and I say, what is something bold I can do today? And I haven't actually used those words, but I'm going to now.
Yeah.
But like, what is something I can do today that sounds hard? That actually will give me new momentum. And I find that usually it's some sort of phone call. And sometimes if I don't necessarily have something bold per se that I can do, just calling someone and asking for feedback or help has been extremely
Mm.
valuable as well.
Yeah, it's that the voicing it. I think that's a big
Mhm.
part of it when and and voicing it in a way that's proactive and actually helpful versus I know when I'm in those spaces, maybe the voicing that I lean towards is more the negativity, the venting, the everything is horrible and I don't know what to do, but you're right. I think it can be a very bold action to say, okay, I know I'm feeling stuck. What is something I can do to get out of this? Or what is
Mm,
the smallest thing on my list that I can do today so that tomorrow that's not on there? Or like you said, making a phone call to those trusted people to ask for advice or ask for help. I think voicing it is a
mm,
big part of it too, recognizing that hey, this is where I'm at and how am I going to get out of it? What am I going to do?
mm,
And so I'm hearing a lot with your story of those moments of being bold and being creative and certainly now you are a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, and that is a very bold decision, right? Going from that nonprofit world. I remember sitting with you. I think we were at coffee when you told me that you were starting your own business, and my eyes, I'm sure, got very large, and I was so excited for you because just being your friend, I knew that it was going to be something that you would be very successful at. So tell us what drove the passion to start your own business and where that's gotten you to today.
It's a great question. And honestly, part of me wants to just say I have no idea because I feel I have throughout my life, I feel like I've just continued to follow little nudges, or I often will even call them God winks of
Mm-hmm.
like there just is something inside of me that is telling me to do something. And I it's interesting because I could also be seen as a bit impulsive to some. I'm one of those people that I usually don't think a lot before I make a decision, which I have learned in a lot of scenarios. It is very important to evaluate a decision before making it. However, I actually saw this thing on Instagram. I want to say it was yesterday, and I'm not going to quote it properly, but the general concept was you have to just make decisions. Like life is one
Mm,
of those things where when you get to the end of your life, and you look back, you don't want to say, I wish I would have, or I would have, should have, could have done this, or I wish I would have done things a little differently. And I think a lot of people who probably feel a stronger level of satisfaction at the end of their life are people who are courageous enough to just make decisions. And decision fatigue is such a huge thing in our world. And I think, too, the reason why we often don't make decisions is because of fear. And so I could have sat in fear and just said, it would be dreamy to have my own business, but I don't have enough ducks in a row. But I was grateful enough to have just one client that I knew was going to kind of sustain me for a little bit as kind of I started as more of an independent consultant.
sure.
Everyone's a consultant these days, it seems like, but an independent consultant. I had no idea what the heck I was doing. I told my husband, and he and I still to this day laugh. I said, I'm going to quit my job to be a motivational speaker. and I quit my job. It was April 2020. What was happening
Mm.
in April of 2020? The whole
Oh,
world.
yes. Such a fun time.
It was a really fun time. Everything was shut down, but yet I had my husband's support, which I cannot forget to, thank him profusely that he still allowed me and our family to make that decision because that didn't just impact me, it impacted him as well. And I told him, I said, I'm leaving a nonprofit job. And if I don't find a way to kind of bridge the gap in the next year, I will go and get a waitress job at the restaurant next door. So he and I made it a fun game. And again, it was just one decision. I had
Mm.
one, like I said, one client. Outside of that, I knew I needed to just quote unquote hustle in order to figure out what the heck I wanted to do. And even to this day, my business, as you've probably noticed, Carrie, it kind of has a mind of its own in a sense. I
Yeah.
and that's where I've just allowed like one decision after another to guide me. And I am a very futuristic person, so I like to think about the big picture, but I also have found that as much of a planner as I am, just resting in the moment and knowing that, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Like,
Mm.
if this doesn't work out, I can go and get a different job.
Yes.
So,
My newest like obsession is shower affirmation cards. They're cards that stick to the wall of your shower. And the one I have is worry doesn't change the outcome, so I choose to focus on the present. And it's really helped me shift because, as you know, I'm also very futuristic. We've had many coffee chats of what are the next 5, 10 years gonna look like? And I could totally spiral in just a worry state of, okay, yeah, what's gonna happen? And it's fun to think about the future, and I'm learning the more that we focus on the present, the better. And to just, like you said, it's one decision at a time. And eventually it's going to be 5 years later, and we're going to have seen all the beautiful, amazing things that have come from those decisions. The other things that you were mentioning, there's so much that you just said that I'm like, wow, we could talk about so many different spaces. But I love those God winks, and for those of not everyone's a person of faith, but for those of us that are, we can relate to that concept. Or if someone's not a person of faith, they can probably relate to, like you said, that nudge or their intuition or something telling them, I think this is something I have to do. And I know that it can feel really bold in moments to lean into those things because you're going off of pure faith, right? Or a pure intuition. There's no proof that says this is going to work. This business that you started, there is no way for you to know on day one that it was going to bring you to where you are today, but you believed in yourself. You believed in that God wink, or that moment of just pure faith and saying, I can do this. And that is a true act of being bold, of leaning into those moments versus leaning away. I know I've had a lot of moments where I probably lean away in those moments because I'm afraid or fearful of what that could mean, or the change that might come from making that decision. And then the other side of it, I was going to say, with an entrepreneur too, like that decision fatigue that you kind of talked about before. Now you're a business owner and you got to make all the decisions. And so it's really relatable to be in a place where there's too much and you're overwhelmed and you're just trying to figure out what comes next. And so I love that concept of just it's one decision at a time. What am I going to do next? How am I going to get there? And the support system. I think every episode that I've recorded that has come up in some form or fashion, that we cannot do life alone. We have people in our corner that help us. And so it was, your husband allowing you to do that, that client that trusted in you and said, hey, this is, yep, I'm gonna invest in you. I believe in you. And we all need those people to lift us up in those moments.
Well, and it just takes the one. Like for me, it was one client, it was one
Mhm.
person who believed in me. And I think we also have to shut out all the external noise. And that's the hardest thing. And
Yes.
I've had actually a lot of conversations with women lately who have said, sometimes I don't like to tell people what I'm planning to do because I see the look on their face and I see their doubt or their
Mm.
questioning. And so that's something that I've even struggled with sometimes is like, I'm an open book. So I like to tell everybody about everything I'm doing. However, even in my early days, I had people that when I would try to tell them what I was doing, they would look at me and they would be so confused, or they would kind of look at me like, that doesn't seem like a real job. Like
Yeah.
I've still gotten that. I have moments where people will ask, so what do you do? And
Hmm.
I freeze up a little bit because I think we're all very self conscious of feeling this, like you talked about earlier, this high expectation of doing big, bold things. And sometimes one of the boldest things we can do is just believe in ourselves and trust in God, trust in our intuition that we are truly following the best next steps for what is meant for our journey.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept that you're having those conversations with women, because I can relate to that in the sense of I remember last summer in some therapy sessions with my therapist, we were talking about this and just how vulnerable it is to share those things of I have this whole plan and this is a step I want to take, but as soon as you voice that, you open the door to judgment or to
Mm,
doubt or to fear, or it, like you said, it in our own head, we can build up this story too of what we think what's going to happen and how we're going to do it, and we can have this whole plan, and then we tell someone else, and like you said, they may not even say the words, but their face shows it, and all of a sudden we're back to a place where we don't believe in ourselves, and we've allowed that to change our entire approach to doing something. And yes, there's definitely been moments where I don't tell people. And I ran a 10-mile race last year, and I did not tell very many people because I was like, if I don't actually do this, or if I can't do this, everyone's going to have these expectations of me. Or even if I say I ran a 10-mile race, people are like, wow, I didn't know she was a runner. And I am not. I am a jogger. And even that, I definitely walk some, but it was just this, like, the fear of telling someone makes it real and
mhm,
makes it, like I said, open to that judgment and that fear of, okay, what's someone going to think about this? And that changes my own belief. And how do we craft our own story and believe in that
mm,
story? Because that's what matters most. It doesn't matter if, yeah, person on the street thinks your job is, they're like, what does that mean? Like, if you believe in it, then that's what matters. But it's really hard to do.
Well, and I've had people that have probably walked away from that conversation with me and said, I just talked to this girl, Kelsey, and she's doing something really awesome. And I
Yeah.
think we get so wrapped up in our own perceptions of ourselves that
Hmm.
we worry so much about what others think that even if they give us a look that we don't know how to interpret when we say something bold, or do something bold, we just make up the story in our own head. And I think
Yes.
that's maybe a Brene Brown thing that
Yes.
she talks about. You're nodding
Yep.
like you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, what's the story you're telling yourself? And that,
Yes.
just that phrase alone really had me thinking, okay, what is the story I'm telling myself? And actually, what is the truth? Um,
Hmm.
and we just can get in such a spiral that's not healthy, and
Exactly.
doesn't serve us well. And so it's really important that we really take care of our minds too, and our
Hmm.
mindset. And I get in these habits of not listening to growth podcasts or not
Hmm.
doing my daily devotional, and I get into these lulls where I'm not taking the time to personally grow. And I actually think those are the times when my self-confidence is lowest, because I'm not fueling my brain with positivity. um,
Yeah, I
so it's
agree.
been really
Yes.
important.
Yes, Brene Brown is, you can't see my shelf. I have like four of her books up there. That's all of the stuff I enjoyed. Yes, that crafting this story, I think, is such an important thing for us to be thinking about, because it is true. I've probably written a novel about myself that isn't true at
Yeah.
all at this point. And I think something that I have found helpful is even just a quick check-in with yourself, whether it's a journal, or you said if it's just after that conversation of, okay, like, how am I feeling? Am I telling myself this, or is this the truth? Like, really almost, yeah, questioning yourself to figure out that, where is this feeling coming from? Why am I feeling this way about myself? Um, and just using that as an opportunity to rewrite the story back to what we believed in ourselves to begin with. Like, no, I am bold, I can do this, like, I believe in myself, I have people that support me. And just to use that as an opportunity to
Mm,
keep moving forward, to make that next decision. Because like you said, yes, I think the amount of times that we probably associate a negative response to something, in reality, positivity is probably what comes from it, right? We share those stories of, how many people you told, hey, I'm starting this business. And you probably had a lot of people that were excited for you, and
mhm,
maybe a few that gave you that look of doubt. And our mind focuses on the look
mhm,
of doubt versus the hundreds of people that are showering us with excitement. Or, I saw somewhere once, even just in terms of social media, when we get in this comparison game of, I've posted this picture, or, as a business owner, I'm sure you post lots of content out there, and maybe only 20 people engage with it, or 30 people. And our minds, because we're comparing ourselves to these other numbers, go, wow, that's really not that many. But if 30 people in real life told you, like, that's a great idea, or I'm excited about that, or wow, that is, like, looks like such a fun vacation, you would be overwhelmed. That's a lot of people telling you those great things. But it's just this weird mind game that we play. And so I love what you said of, we got to take care of our minds too,
yeah.
so that we can make those decisions, keep moving forward. Um,
Yes.
and so
Well, and
some, Yeah,
And
go ahead.
you hit on a really good point, Carrie, that I want to make sure to capitalize on, which is we have to identify almost proactively what those pain points are.
Hmm.
Because if we know that for whatever reason, when we share something, that if someone gives a funny facial expression, that we're going to kind of retract or feel negative about that, we have to proactively be thinking about how would I handle that? Or for me, when I leave this podcast today, or whenever I leave a room, anytime I leave a room, a meeting, a speaking engagement, the second I leave, that's when my negative internal dialogue turns on.
Yep.
So, because I've pinpointed that, I'm actually going to leave this podcast and say, that was awesome. And like tell myself really positive things to fuel my mind so that I don't sit and self critique, because we could spend so much time being bold and then immediately self critiquing how we approached it. And that just, to me, that's been so defeating in the past. So I've had to
Yeah.
work really hard to be proactive in how do I leave the room.
Mm, I love that. Of yeah, the second you get away, I think of how many conversations I've been in, and maybe it was a time where I had to be bold in that conversation, and by the end of it, I was like, okay, I said what I had to say. And yeah, as soon as you walk away from it, then those gremlins take over and you start to be like, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that, or maybe I should have said this, or well, how did they
Mhm.
interpret what I said? Maybe that's not what I actually meant. That just happened to me yesterday. There was something with my team where I said something and I went to my lunch and I was just overthinking it. And I was like, I don't think I came off the right way. I'm really sorry. And they were like, what are you talking about? Like,
Mhm.
that's not at all what happened. And I was like, okay, well, just wanted to make sure. But yes, we all do that. So I love that mindset shift of when you walk out of the room or you walk out of a conversation, like, that was great. Like, give yourself that pat on the back, just the way that we would a friend.
Mhm.
I think some of that too, I've learned also like reflecting on the things that we value can help us in those moments. And a podcast I was listening to, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. I wish I could always remember which podcast or which episode associates to which nugget of information. Um, but she was talking about this concept of when do you be defiant? And I think defiant in her terms could be associated with bold, right? How when do we speak up? When do we make
Mhm.
that choice? And she said a lot of people really struggle with knowing when to do it because
Mm.
most of us are just going to say, nope, it's not the right time. Um, and so she was talking about this concept of when trying to decide that, it tying back to your values of first, does doing this, being bold in this moment align with who I am as a person, align with the things that I value? But then the spin on it that she brought that I really liked was taking yourself out of it because we typically do associate ourselves in maybe a more negative way. And the people that don't, I need to learn everything from them. But she said, when you take yourself out of it and instead ask yourself the question, would someone who values these things be bold in this moment? Someone who values speaking up for themselves, would they be bold in this moment? And I have found that even just in the short time I've been shifting my brain a little bit, that's been really helpful of because yeah, am I going to do this? No. But someone who really values being wholehearted and showing up authentically would be bold and say something in this moment. Or I think about family situations, right? Like someone who says that they value family would not have this negative reaction to the 5 things on my calendar this week. Like instead, they'd be really grateful that they have those things. And so it's taking ourselves out of it can almost help us put ourselves back into it in a weird way, if that makes sense. But I loved that shift of how we make those decisions and tie our values into it too.
Well, and I'm not sure why my brain went here, but as you were talking about these situations and would I be bold in this moment, I think what's so hard is in our day and age too, technology is so readily available that it's easy for us to, instead of having a bold conversation,
Mm,
just say something over an email, say something over a text. And I think that's something that I've worked really hard on too, is if I have the urge to send it in an email, think to myself, is can I be a little bit more bold and actually pick up the phone and talk to this person? Is that,
yeah.
especially if you said a defiant moment, like if there's a moment where I want to politely disagree with someone. But also I like what you said about taking yourself or taking kind of your own, almost taking your own emotions out of it and like
Yes.
removing Kelsey or removing Carrie from the situation and
Hmm.
just thinking about the situation as a whole. Because I think sometimes being bold, I think can come with some emotions. And
Yes.
if emotions are wrapped up in being bold, that's when to me it gets to that point of maybe defiance, or and
Mhm.
so that's where defiance can be a strong term and maybe like almost perceived as like the negative version of bold. And I think
Yeah.
if we're being bold in a way that's kind and
Mm.
approachable, it hopefully wouldn't be seen as defiant, even if we are politely disagreeing.
Yes, yes, I wholeheartedly agree that being bold doesn't have to come off as aggressive or
Mhm.
defiant in that way
Yeah.
that so many of those decisions that we make. And again, I even think about sometimes like I did a presentation a couple weeks ago where I was like, okay, my bold moment in this moment was the fact that I'm like standing up in front of this group and I am wearing an outfit that I wasn't sure if I loved when I walked out the door. Like that is a bold moment. And I love what you said about the emotions being tied to those things because I think emotions are tied to everything that we do.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
more that we let those emotions control us, like emotions aren't bad, emotions
Right.
aren't good, right? I'm learning that through therapy and all the things that like it's not necessarily that it's bad or good, but sometimes our emotions can control us versus
Mhm.
us deciding I don't have to feel this way in this moment. I can feel grounded or I can feel confident. I can believe in myself versus those emotions that maybe make us feel less inclined to be bold. Like, oh, I'm feeling shameful, or I'm feeling fearful, I'm hesitant in these moments. And and if we can find a way to separate those and just really believe in ourselves in those ways, I think is just going to help us make those decisions better. And one thing we haven't talked about yet is that you're a mom.
Right.
You have a sweet little girl.
Mm.
And I think that someone who is not a mom and doesn't have children yet, I think that is something so bold. Like someone becoming a parent, I think is such a bold thing to do because, especially as a woman, it really changes how you approach your career, right? All of a sudden, you are. I remember when you told me you were pregnant and a conversation we had was, what does this look like for my business? Like, how do I go about this? And what does it look like after? And I think even just some of the conversations we've had as you've become a mom, the way that you approach your business has probably shifted, or the people that you work with that maybe has shifted in a different way. So I would love to spend some time talking about being a
Yeah.
mom and just what that was like when you, yeah, like let's start with the emotions, right? When you
Mm.
found out that you were going to become a mom and being a business owner, and it wasn't that long after COVID, so we were still in kind of a crazy time of life. Would love to just hear what that experience was like for you.
Hmm. Well, it was exciting. I think my husband and I had been married for maybe 3 years, and found out I was pregnant and was definitely very surprised and excited and really ready to take on the challenge. But also, yes, it was kind of this moment of how, like, will I be able to continue running a business and also being a mom? And I knew that my dream was never to necessarily stay home full time, which I also think is a very bold decision
Yes,
for women out there that are like, you know what? I want to stay home full time. Like that, talk about being bold. That is bold.
absolutely.
And
Yes.
so I think that what I've learned, that's like the extreme version of a decision that might be made through finding out you have kids. But what I have found is that the my priorities and the way that I allow myself to get emotionally wrapped up in things is much
Mm,
different. I think before becoming a mom, I cared so deeply about work that I almost worshiped it. It was almost
mm,
like this thing that everything had to be perfect, and I wanted to spend all waking hours trying to improve my business. And once I had a child, I realized I just can't do that anymore. And
mm,
I found myself probably for the first year just really floundering and not knowing exactly how to balance, and having moments of really wanting to pour into work, and then having moments of being like, I just want to quit everything and just be a mom because
mm,
I can't do both. And I think society tries to tell us that we can truly, as women, do it all.
mm,
And I think that in some circumstances, like, I'm fully supportive of like women trying to balance all the things, but I also think we need to be realistic with what's possible and what we want. And
mhm,
so I've just found that, like, for me, if I have a little bit more flexibility in my morning and a little bit more flexibility at the end of the day, like to allow myself to be a little bit more present for my family, that has been extremely important. And in terms of being bold, I think one of the boldest things that I've had to do is really scale back my calendar in a whole different way, because I I really can't say yes to everything the way I used to. And I think, Carrie, this is probably similar for you in moving out to Holly, where
Hmm.
it's like you want to say yes to still seeing your friends on a regular basis and coming to Fargo, but your schedule just changes. And I'm an extreme introvert, I'm an extreme yes person, and so I spent all the way into my early 30s being a yes person, and now I've really had to become more of a no person. And
Hmm.
that in itself has been one of the most scary and challenging things that I've ever gone through. So
Yes.
that's kind of where I'm at with the evolution of being a business owner and a mom. It really has changed things for me.
Well, I just want to first say thank you for the vulnerability, the honesty, and
Yeah.
that recognition of, yeah, shifting from being a yes person to being a no person. And yes, I can relate to that. Again, different life circumstances, just moving
Yeah.
to a new city, but it was something that I think I had to do a lot of work with my identity and what I had wrapped my
Mhm.
identity in. And I think for the first, yeah, probably 5 to 6 years of my career was my identity. And as an extension of that, I think people had put this perception of me of, oh, Carrie's a people person, she's a connector, she's a yes person, she's going to do all of the things. And when I was in a different life circumstance and just wasn't in a space where I could do those things, I started to feel this guilt of, if I say no, like that's going to change someone's perception of me. They're not going to see me as this connector. And I think the work that I had to do was really recognizing, what do I want my identity to be? And it wasn't that I'm not a people person. I am very much still a people person, but it shifted to, I'm a people person for my close circle of friends, those people that I'm going to show up for at any time of the day. I will move things in my schedule if they need me. And I don't have as much flexibility to say yes to every coffee invite from someone on LinkedIn, or say yes to being at every office social because I want to see coworkers. And that's okay as long as it's making me feel better. And so I think in your story, it's like I said, I think there's maybe some overlap there between ours in different ways, but just that identity shift that probably came with being a mom is now a part of your identity. And before we hopped on, we were talking a little bit about identity and those other things that make us up. And you mentioned creativity earlier, and creativity is a big part of it, as well as musical ability. You played violin at my wedding, which was so special.
Yeah.
And I would love to just hear how that talent and being a violinist and a singer has also been a big part of who you've been through all of these life circumstances, changing jobs, starting a business, becoming a mom, how that's helped keep you grounded and maybe helped keep you connected to the identity that you have.
Well, and that's a great transition. I think I love how much you're talking about identity, because one thing that just keeps coming to mind is we will always be in a state of comparing ourselves to our younger version of ourselves.
Mm, hmm.
And that's what trips me up. So when
Yes.
I was in my 20s, I was playing my violin all the time. I was singing all the time. I was at every happy hour, at every networking event. And that, like, the way that I showed up in the world was such a huge piece of my identity. And the music thing has always been something that it brings me back to who I feel like I really am at my core. I love to
Hmm.
sing. Like I said, I love to play violin. I'm so glad I had the opportunity to play at your wedding. And truly, Carrie, now some of my favorite moments are when my daughter and I get to sing together,
Hmm.
and like we have dance parties all the time. And I don't do as much music as I used to. However, I do still find those opportunities to sing or play violin because that's such a huge part of my identity. But I've also told myself that this is a season. And so
Hmm.
I think it was last weekend was the regional hockey tournaments here in town at the Shields Arena. And I could not believe it, because for the first time ever, I said no to singing the national anthem for the regional hockey tournament, because I had a trip planned to be with my dad for his birthday. And
Hmm.
my dad is so sweet. He would have understood. It would have been such a great opportunity. And I actually haven't sang the national anthem for a lot of things in the past, and or in the past couple of years I haven't been doing it as often. And so when I got that call, my instant reaction was, if I say no to this is my passion, and I'm going to lose the feeling of that sense of
Yeah.
identity of my music. And what if they never ask me again?
Yep.
Is the question that I that I
Yep.
ask myself. But because of the season of life I'm in, like, music is something that still drives me and that I'm still extremely passionate about. However, on nights and weekends, I'm a little bit less likely to be seen performing somewhere
Mhm.
or playing my violin, because I'm looking at the different components of my life and I'm thinking, I am never going to get this time back with my 2.5 year
Yeah.
old. And it is one of the most painful decisions to make, to choose between like a true passion that I absolutely love. And then my dad, I've never, he's just turned 64, so he's still pretty young, but like he doesn't live in town. And so thinking about, we had promised we'd be there for his birthday. I thought, in this situation, my family is just going to come first. I haven't been
Hmm.
home for over 3 months, or I hadn't seen him since Christmas. So I think, to answer your question, yes, music is a passion and it drives me. And I think as we get older, it's very important, especially as women, that we still, and especially as moms, that we still maintain certain hobbies. But also, I've had to let go of certain components of my identity and
Hmm.
recognize I can still sprinkle them in, but this is just a season. And every season comes with different shifts. And I can always do more music in 5 years from now or 10 years from now. But sometimes, I think our priorities have to shift depending on where we're at in life.
Yes, I agree. And I love what you said about how you're seeing that through your daughter too, of we think of our identities having to be
Mm.
these pieces of ourselves, but I think it can be really fun when we bring that support circle into our identity. And for you, it's, yeah, music is, I mean, it's always going to be there, right? And
Mhm.
it maybe looks different than it used to, but now you get to bring your daughter into that piece of you and to show her
Mhm.
your love for music and to inspire her. And I think about, we talk about like inner child work all the time, right? And
Mm.
picturing yourself when you were that kid, and now it's like you almost get to do that through your daughter, of helping inspire her with these and helping her discover like what does she want to do and how does that play out. And for people that don't have kids, I think we can still do that in similar ways. Of a big piece of my identity, people know this, is that I'm a dog mom. Like that's,
Mhm.
it's who I am. And I think that's been fun. Of okay, so I love going for walks with my dog, but I can do that with other people in my life. Or I can, even reading. Like it sounds funny to say that reading is a part of my identity, but I think back to when I was a kid, like I was the kid who would go to Barnes and Noble and have a stack of 10 books and bless my parents for always buying me the books, but or taking me to the library. And now as an adult, that's still a big part of it. And I've found community in that space of joining book clubs or starting a book club. I'm probably in too many book clubs at this point, but we find ways to bring those pieces of our identity along with us, even if it shifts. And I think that's something that we can remember about work too, is that there's phases of our life when our career might be a very large part of our identity, and as we maybe gain more experience, or we bring these other things that are more important to us, like for you becoming a mom, doesn't mean that work has to go away completely, that our career isn't still important to us, but our definition of what that looks like can change. And it doesn't mean that we're any less motivated, that we're any less excited about the work that we do, or any less passionate about the things that we provide to people, but it just means that that doesn't have to take up our entire space. We can give ourselves that credit to say you're more than just this. You're all of these different pieces. Um,
Well,
and yeah,
and I was just going to say, it's easy, for us to talk about this on a podcast. And I also think it's almost like a grieving process, because you're
yeah,
grieving who you used to be.
hmm,
And you're grieving the loss of, that identity and what you used to pour your time and energy into.
hmm,
And so there is this little bit of like, yes, you and I are agreeing on this, and we're like, this is it, it's you just have to be willing to understand that like you're in a new season. But I think I just wanted to pause and say, like, this is
yes,
hard. It's
yes.
not easy
No, you're so
to
true.
go
Yes.
through that process of identity shift.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I went through like 12 weeks of intense therapy last summer to kind of go through this of I
Yeah.
was at a place where I was like my career is everything and I was at just kind of a crossroads of trying to navigate that and it's hard, intensive work. It's and I think the other thing when we talk about identity that you were making me think of when we compare ourselves to that younger self, is that that's where I think the grieving comes up, right? Is that in our minds, it's really hard to wrestle with the fact that we aren't the 20-year-old, we're not the 25-year-old, the 30-year-old, whatever stage of life that we're at, and don't probably take the moment to sit and go, okay, but I'm only thinking of the really good things of that time of my life. I'm not thinking about like there we had I had challenges at every
Yeah.
stage of my life, right? Like being in college, and I have this almost like blinders on of college was this amazing experience and it was so beautiful and I would love to be back in that phase of life and going, okay, but we're not thinking about the really hard moments of friendship in college or the searching for identity because I didn't know who I was at that point.
Mhm.
Or yeah, just the unknowns and every phase of life has those things. But when we look back, because oftentimes, at least for me, I know I'm probably looking back through pictures or on my Instagram feed. And I guarantee you're not seeing the nights where I was crying in my dorm room because I felt alone or just uncertain or I wasn't taking pictures of the exams I was taking, right? I'm only seeing the good moments. And while it's good to think about those fun memories. It's we also have to make sure we do that separation of, but I'm still making fun memories now. I'm still who I am today. And like you said, that's really hard. And it's very easy to talk about on a podcast and for someone to listen to and be like, oh, they make it sound so simple, but it's realistically it's
Mhm.
not simple. There's a lot that goes into that.
Absolutely, and it's challenging, and yeah, your younger self would be so proud of where you're at now, and it's easy to think about how much energy. Like I'm so tired a lot of the time, and it's
Yes.
like, oh, like I'm not firing on all cylinders the way that I could in my
Hmm.
early career, and so that's like one very specific example of like I often think like, why can't I just get all these things done really fast the way that I used to? But we're managing all these different things, like
Yep.
managing a family and thinking about like what my child needs to bring to school tomorrow. Like there's just so
Yeah.
much more that's swirling around in our brains because the older we get, the more responsibilities we have typically.
Hmm. Yep.
And so we just can't expect ourselves to be wired and to perform. We're not machines, we're humans.
Yes.
And so I think sometimes when we're younger, we have the opportunity to be a little bit more like machines because we're excited and we're energized and the world is our oyster. And then we get into this season of like, okay, things are maybe a little bit slower, a little bit different.
Hmm.
And it's hard to recognize that it's okay for this to be, it's okay for me to move a little slower in this season.
Yes, that slowing down is something I still have to remind
Yeah,
myself of because I
same.
think back to like the first year out of college, there were weeks where I had something on my calendar every night after work, and
Mhm.
I loved it at that phase of my life. Now I have maybe one or two things after work a week, and I'm exhausted. And just
Yeah.
remembering that, yeah, in that phase of my life, I lived by myself. I had really no responsibilities beyond the job that I did, right? I was a mile away from all my friends. We were in a place where we could go do all these activities and we're craving that type of connection. And now, 10 years later, we're at a very different stage of life. And so those things are going to shift and how we give ourselves that grace to slow down and be okay with just where we are at that present, like we've talked about kind of at the beginning of our conversation. Kelsey, we could talk all day, I think. There's so
So
many
fun.
things. Um, and as we wrap up, I always like to end on just some fun questions, conversational questions. You and I bond over those conversational cards all the time. Um, so you can take these as simple or as complex as you want to in your responses, but
Okay.
just some quick rapid fire. What is your beverage of choice?
Oh yeah, so I thought long and hard about this because I love a good glass of wine or a good cocktail, but I've recently discovered, and maybe this isn't a new drink, but this is a non-alcoholic beverage, peach and clementine San Pellegrino. Have you tried
Okay.
this?
No,
Okay.
but tell me more because I love anything peach.
So it's a sparkling water, and again, it might be new or maybe it's been around for a long time. But I'm pregnant with our second child, so I'm having to explore all of the like LaCroix or like LaCroix type drinks. But it is so good. And
Okay.
it's a little on the sweeter side, but I don't generally like stuff that's too sweet. So I feel like it's kind of the perfect level of sweet, but I'm definitely going to be drinking that on a boat this summer if I can.
Absolutely. I was gonna say I'm right there with you. I'm like, I'm gonna have to give that a shot because that sounds delightful. So
Yes.
good to know. Okay, I'm learning so many new things. What is your favorite way to unwind?
So because I just said it, I'll go that direction, but I am a huge lake person. So winter can be tough. So in the winter, probably just curling up and either reading a book or watching a good Netflix series. But once the ice is off, my husband and I and our daughter, we are on our boat. And I'll be sitting with my peach and clementine San Pellegrino on the boat and just relaxing in the sunshine. Sun is really, really important to me too.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I love
Mhm.
a good lake day in the sunshine. There's not much more that's relaxing than that. Oh, I always like to express gratitude. I think it's important. So what's something you're grateful for today?
Well, other than my family, that I would always lead with, I guess, but we had a snowstorm that really wasn't a snowstorm. So I'm just grateful that I can get around today.
Yes.
So,
Yes, you never know when the weather is predicting horrible
ah,
weather, what we're actually going to get. And thankfully, yes, didn't get too bad today. Hopefully, it stays that way for us.
yes. And, Fargo, it's not always great weather, but I think to just expand on that, just grateful for a good community of
Yes.
supportive people. And yeah.
Yes,
So,
Fargo really is. I've heard people say it's like the biggest small town you'll ever
mhm,
find, and it really
yep,
does feel that way, especially on days where we don't have the best weather. People are out there helping each other out and just caring for each other. So,
totally.
um, okay, if you could eavesdrop on your friends talking about you, what would you want to hear them saying?
Yeah, I thought about this one. It's a tricky one. Like,
I know,
there's so
and
many different
so what
things.
that gets people.
Well, first, I hope that they would say I'm someone who is kind and a person of integrity. I think I fear I never want to be considered flaky. So, like when I say I'm going to do something, I want people to say that I'm good at following through. On a more light note, I hope people think I'm a little funny sometimes. Like I don't think I've been really funny on this podcast, but I think I do have kind of a silly, fun side. So maybe saying I'm funny would be that would be like a really good compliment.
I love that. Well, as your friend, I can agree with all of those things. You are
Oh,
someone who
thank
always
you.
shows up. You are so kind, and we've had many a laughs over
Yeah.
coffee or wine or whatever it might be. So just know that as your friend, I am saying those things.
Mhm.
And that leads me into our final question is what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
Yeah. And again, this is so good. I think most of my life it's always been about big and more, and I think I'm in a season where if there's even one person that because they met me their life, like the trajectory of their life was changed, I think that will
Mm,
make me really happy. And of course with my family, just hoping to leave behind really kind, amazing children, because that's one of the greatest gifts I can leave to the world. But yeah, just really focusing on quality impact versus that usual drive that I have to reach the masses. So if one person even listens to this podcast and feels inspired, that would also be a great legacy with this podcast.
I love that. Yes, I think it's that quality over quantity. And I think just knowing you over these last however many years and the work that you do, I guarantee that you have already started that legacy. And just to see your daughter growing up and your future baby growing up too, I know for sure that they're going to continue your legacy beyond. So, Kelsey, thank you so much for being here. It was such a good conversation. I'm so excited to share this with our listeners. And so thank you to all of the listeners. You can find us on Instagram at the boldest you pod, and share with your friends if there was something that stuck with you. Otherwise, until next time, be bold and we'll see you on our next episode. Thanks again, Kelsey.
Thank you, Carrie.